Hi, I'm DuEwa Frazier, the host of Nerdacity podcast. Welcome to season 2 of the podcast, and this is episode 37, featuring my guest, notable poet Alan King. Alan is a Caribbean American poet whose parents immigrated to the U.S. from Trinidad and Tobago in the early 70s. He's a father, husband, and author of 3 collections of poetry. His newly released book of poems is titled Crooked Smiling Light from Plan B Press. He is also the author of Point Blank from Birch Press and Drift from Aquarius Press. Alan's poetry caught the attention of U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, who said, "Alan King is one of my favorite up-and-coming poets of his generation. His poems are not pop and flash, rather more like a slow dance with someone you're going to love forever." Alan is also a videographer and motion graphics artist. The video he produced for his poem Gluttony was an official selection of the 2021 International Video Poetry Festival in Athens, Greece. A Cave Canem Fellow, Alan is a graduate of the Stonecoast MFA degree program at the University of Southern Maine. He resides with his wife and children and mother-in-law in Bowie, Maryland. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thanks so much for listening. Alan?
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
Great, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me here on Nerdacity podcast as we are pretty much ending our fall season. So thank you for being a part of this new season 2 fall lineup.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. And I want to congratulate you on your new chapbook, Crooked Smiling Light, published by Plan B Press.
Thank you.
And so how exciting is it for you to have a new work during this time, you know, heading into the holiday Christmas season and people wanting to, you know, really support you?
Yeah, I'm just really grateful to Plan B Press for, taking a chance with the manuscript. A lot of these poems I wrote while I was in the MFA program. So about 8 years ago. And so I'm glad that these poems are finally out there and, just hope that they connect with folks. So I'm really excited that these poems are out there.
Wonderful.
And to have this collection.
Yeah, and I know what that journey is like too, the MFA journey and really desiring to, find your creative work a home. And so it sounds like you found a great home for your new collection.
Yeah, they're great over at Plan B Press.
Wonderful. And so, Alan, can you share a little bit about your journey as a writer with our audience? While I know that you're a Cave Canem Fellow, I also know that you did study with award-winning poet Dr. Medina. Is that correct?
Sure. So, definitely. Dr. Medina is part of my journey. And actually, at the time when I met Dr. Medina, I had already been writing poems. I was not a Cave Canem Fellow at the time, but I was workshopping. DC had a lot of Cave Canem writers because a lot of the writers that were in the founding class of Cave Canem came from DC. So like Brandon Johnson, Brian Gilmore.
Oh,
so I was
yeah.
I was already workshopping with Brandon Johnson.
Uh-huh.
And, so I think Medina came to DC in 2003. That's when he came to Howard. And I found out about his class at Howard through another poet, Fred Joyner.
Oh, yeah, I know Fred. Uh-huh.
Yeah. He, and I'm not even surprised Fred. We used to call Fred the unofficial mayor of DC.
Yeah, that's cool. And I know Truth Thomas and folks like that, Cherry Castle Publishing. And so that's wonderful. The whole network in the DMV is amazing.
Yeah, so Fred had told me about the class, and he said that the Dr. Medina was open to us crashing his class.
Mm-hmm.
So I showed up the next time it was his the next time his class was in session,
Mm-hmm.
and I had never met Dr. Medina prior to then. I just rolled up in the classroom. He wasn't there yet. And some students start filing in. He comes in, he starts
Mm-hmm.
talking to some of the students, he's laughing, joking, and then just out of instinct, like he just kind of felt like something was different. So he looked over in my direction,
Mm-hmm.
and, and he still carried on his conversation with the student and was nodding. Then he was like, "Hey man," he said, "Who you be, man? Who you be?" So I'm like, oh my gosh. So I told him how I found out about his class, and I guess I said the magic word. I said, "Yeah, I found out your class from Fred Jordan." He was like, "Oh, okay, all right, all right."
Right. Yeah.
So he let me stay, and he asked me to read a poem. Uh, he asked me if I had a poem on me because he was doing a cipher in the class, and I had a poem that I'd been workshopping with Brandon.
Uh-huh.
And so when I read it, Medina, he liked the poem, and he allowed me to stay. And what ended up happening was, I think after I crashed his class, and then later that day, Fred came. Once we crashed his class, it was like a domino effect. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, more and more people who knew about him or learned about him, started crashing his class. And then it got to a point where his classes were standing room only.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, if you had a photo of his classes, then you would see students sitting on the floor
I'm
cross-legged.
sure.
And that's how it was. And more and more people. He had people that actually registered for his class, but then he had people. But he was so open to writers from the community crashing the class, and that ended up creating a culture. Because um, after we crashed his class, Medina, it'd be time to eat dinner, and so Medina would be like, "Hey, what y'all trying to do?"
Hey, let's go get something to eat.
Exactly. And we just started doing that. And I think he had classes 2 days that week. One of the days was on a Thursday.
Uh-huh.
Wow, but at the time it was a great day to go listen to jazz music in DC. And
Mm-hmm.
so we'd go, and that became our Thursday ritual. We'd go to Medina's class, and then we go out, get something to eat afterwards, and then we just kind of stroll around on U Street and pop into. We used to go to the spot. It's not around anymore. It was Cafe Nema, and
Uh-huh.
see the Young Lions, the young group of jazz musicians play. And I just have to add this really quick story. One time we saw a guy wearing a suit with his hair slicked back, and we were just kind of like, nah, that's not him. That's not him. So I went to the bathroom, and while I'm in
Mm-hmm.
the bathroom, I hear this like eruption of applause and people screaming and oh my God. Oh. So when I come out,
You're not talking about Miles Davis, are you?
no, 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 it was Herbie Hancock.
Oh, Herbie Hancock. Oh
Herbie Hancock,
my.
that was Herbie Hancock, and Herbie Hancock was there that night because one of the members of the Young Lions, Alan Johnson, who was on
Uh-huh.
the keys, was really good friends with Herbie Hancock. And Herbie Hancock was in town. He came
Mm-hmm.
to Nema to hear Alan play, and that night everybody was trying to get him to play. He was like, "No, no, no, I'm here to see my friend play." The owner of the place begged him to play. Everybody was like, "Oh man, please, 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 please." He's like, "No, no, no, no." So then when the owner went up to him, shook his hand, said it was an honor for you to be here, blah 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 blah. The owner goes to leave, and at that moment, Alan is like taunting Herbie Hancock. And so he's playing, he looks up at Herbie Hancock, he smiles, is like, "Yo, you want some of this?"
Mm.
And Herbie Hancock got up. Everybody screamed. The owner threw his coat off and ran right back.
Right.
and Herbie Hancock played about 4 or 5 numbers with the rest of the band, and at midnight they shut it down, and that's significant because they used to jam until like 2 a.m. But
Wow.
Hancock finished playing, they shut it down, and so that was just some of the we would experience like little surprises like that after Medina's workshops.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like just, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement, and definitely that poetry camaraderie that, the poetry community is known for,
Hmm.
you know. And
Yeah, yeah.
so Alan, can you tell me about how you came to become a writer, become a poet, in
Mhm.
terms of even before that? And I saw you've got a number of readings on YouTube. I really enjoyed your Poets versus the Pandemic reading. That was
Oh,
just
thank
some
you,
weeks back. That was really cool.
thank
And I
you.
know you've been at Busboys and Poets, and I think you've done some things with the American Poetry Museum. Is that
Uh-huh.
correct?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, so you've really done a lot. Tell me what is your journey like? Were you an English major? Were you taking workshops? Did you have a particular mentor, early on? Were there certain books or writers that you were following? What was your journey like at the beginning?
So my journey started in middle school, and was we did a unit on poetry, and I remember at the time I was writing a lot of rhyming poems,
Mm-hmm.
and what really drew me to it was the rhythm and the rhymes and the poems, and so I enjoyed that. And then I had stopped writing for a while, and then when I got to high school, I really got into it to try to get girls. And so, yeah, I mean, as shallow as that sounds, that's where my journey started.
Oh, okay.
And,
So were you impacted by, the Love Jones movie and all of that?
nah, no, it was,
Okay.
I just knew that, that the girls like poetry. And so I was like, oh man, if I could do that, I would,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, like I'd be unstoppable. And so
Okay.
I did that, and that was cool. But then I also took a unit on poetry, and it was in high school when I met my first poet, which was my English teacher, Mr.
Uh-huh.
Grimes. And
Mr. Who?
Mr. Grimes,
Mr. Grimes, okay.
and so he would bring his poems. Well, he would teach us different rhyme schemes. So he would teach us to write sonnets, all this stuff. And up to that moment, I didn't, I thought poetry, you wrote it and you maybe, read it when you were around relatives or whatever. And I didn't think there was much else for it. But then Mr. Grimes would bring his poems to class and say, "Hey, can I try something out on y'all?" I said, "Well, why you want to try it out?" He said, "Oh, I'm getting ready to go. I think this evening I'm going to go read these poems when I go to DC." And
Mm.
I was like, "What?" And so my world just opened. I was like, "Hold up, hold up." So keep going. There is an audience of people waiting to hear poetry. He said, "Yeah, there's a bunch."
Yes.
And oh my gosh. So then poetry in that moment went from, being something that sat on a page and maybe sat in some dusty journals to something that can, a way of connecting with people. And, so that pretty much started me, got me started seriously on the journey. But I was, I wasn't reading anybody. And like a lot of people who start out writing, I didn't sound like anybody. And the funny thing is, a lot of people who do that end up sounding like people who don't read other people. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think it was in college when I was in the DC spoken word scene, and I had connected with some people through OKPlayer.com, the official, what was the official roots site at the time. And so I was posting some poems on the freestyle board. And there was some folks on there. I like their work. They like my work. And then we found out that we were in DC, and
Uh-huh.
I connected with them. And one of them was actually co-hosting an open mic that used to be in Adams Morgan.
Oh,
And
okay.
I went through there, checked that out, and then that's where my community started.
Mm.
Started meeting other poets from the message board that also lived in DC. That's where I met Derek Weston
Oh
Brown.
yeah, Derek. I know Derek. I interviewed him
Uh-huh.
some years ago. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we met through OKPlayer.com.
Wow,
And
that is so cool.
yeah, he was in DC for he had just 2001. He just came to DC. No, sorry, yeah, 2001. Yeah, he had just came to DC to start his MFA program, and
Okay.
so we linked up, and he and I we've been best friends ever since. So yeah,
Yeah,
20
yeah.
years,
That's cool.
20
And
years.
it's funny you mentioning OK Player because I used to produce a lot of poetry events, poetry and music events in New York City, and I would often use the OK Player site and
Hmm.
forums to promote my events. Like that
Wow.
was like one of the sites I was a member of. So I definitely remember how great that site was for sure.
Yeah, it was. I mean, and I just I won't stay too long on the site. But another cool thing about the site though was that once we had this community of folks, then you had another set of folks who did not post on the message board, like the poetry board. They were more
Right.
like and so we started linking up with them, and then
Uh-huh.
you had the DC OK players, the New York OK players, and we would actually at some point we were doing road trips to meet one another.
Wow.
And yeah, it was a crazy community, but that's where I met Derek and the rest of my community. And
Uh-huh.
then they were the ones sliding me books like, yo, you may want to check this person out. So I think I started out reading Nikki Giovanni, and
Mm-hmm.
then another person that was on OK Player, but who wasn't in DC. She was like, oh man, yeah, Nikki's cool, but check out Sonia Sanchez.
Oh, of course.
And
Right,
I,
right.
I went out. I read. I went out and got "Shake Loose My Skin," her
Oh, yeah.
collectors, and like when I first read it, I was like, okay, cool. And then it wasn't until like the third time I revisited that full collection,
Mm-hmm.
things just started hitting me in a different way.
Wow.
Oh, and so I've lost count of how many times I've gone back to that collection and gone through it cover to cover.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, that was also the early part of me learning, like reading and learning what was possible in poetry and kind of learning to, being exposed to different techniques that writers were using, kind of borrowing and then kind of trying to make my own thing, from what I borrowed. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and that started on thing. Yusef Komanyaka was another poet. Folks was like, yo, you need to check him out. I think when Brutal Imagination came out, they're like, yo, you need to check out Cornelia Beatty. And so, like, they were very instrumental in me building my poetry book collection.
Sure. Your library, so to speak. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. But it was a great time. And I think it was a great time to be a poet because when I got on the open mic, and not saying that I glorified that this happened, and I could see how if this had happened to somebody who was probably a little bit more sensitive than me, that they probably would have stopped poetry. But I remember when I did the open mics and I didn't know what I was talking about, and I was trying to emulate the spoken word poets that I thought were cool. I
Mm-hmm.
used to get heckled. I got heckled, and
Oh, wow.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
folks I'd be doing a poem, and and the poem wasn't really saying anything. It was just more so me, copying the spoken word rhythm and the
Sure.
style. And there'd be folks on the front row like, yo, what is he talking about?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And then at some point, man, it was so bad, I'd hear people like, yo, please make it stop.
Oh,
You
no.
blah.
Okay.
So, but looking back on it, I was like, oh man, I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I think for me, like it was very humbling because it was like,
Sure.
later on, I look back and I'm like, oh man, I really didn't know what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought I could just get up there, put a bunch of words together, and say them in a certain way.
Right.
But so all of that was part of my teaching. And then when we read poems at Yogi Records, that was the open mic. That was the poetry spot that was in Adams Morgan.
Uh-huh.
When we started out, we didn't have a crowd of people, so we would just get on the mic and read to each other. And Ray, it was a Yogi Records. So Ray, who owned the record store, would he put this large speaker on the sidewalk. Yeah. And so anybody who was on the mic, the people walking by could hear. And so it was nerve wracking for me at the time because I wasn't used to reading in public. But I think what Yogi Records allowed me to do was because we didn't have an audience, I was able to get up and practice and get used to hearing what I sounded like on the mic and
Mm-hmm.
being comfortable with that because I think we all have like our internal voices, like how we hear ourselves. And
Right.
we hear the external voice, we're like, oh, that can't be me because that's so different from like the voice we hear in our head.
Right.
So it was getting used to hearing that voice, hearing
That
what I sounded
voice.
like
Mm-hmm.
external, and which really led to me being comfortable getting on the mic and sharing work.
Well, that's wonderful. I appreciate you sharing this. And this is going to be a gem of an interview for a lot of people, especially emerging poets. You don't often hear about the stumbles of what poets and writers go through, Alan. A lot of times I don't
Mm,
think people share things that, were humbling or maybe embarrassing moments. But these are all good things to know because it's showing your growth and showing
mhm.
that, as you mentioned, sometimes it's not as easy as just getting up there and saying some words, as your thought goes into it, as well as a maturation of yourself as the artist. I know for me, I went through that as well. My heart used to just race off the charts whenever I would, get on the stage at Brooklyn, like, in the Brooklyn Moon or the New Year Weekend, but I would force myself to do it, even though I
Mhm.
felt like, I'm going to pass out. And eventually, eventually that stopped. Like, and it's, those are things we don't talk about, how you're so nervous and you're so afraid, and maybe you don't know what you're afraid of, or maybe it's just, as you mentioned, audience criticism, or seeing someone's face in the audience who's making a face at you, or, really things like that that could really get to you, as you mentioned, and make you go, you know what, I need a break from this.
Mm,
But that's the proof is in the pudding on, were you called to do this? And for a lot of us, it's a calling. Even if you say,
yeah.
okay, you said you got in it for girls. Yeah, that maybe that's what you think. But the universe was calling you to this anyway, because you stuck to it and you've really uh, made something out of it for yourself in sharing with the world and with the poetry community. And so we know that you're not still in it just for the girls.
Well, no, my
That
wife would kill me.
it's right. And I know you have a beautiful wife and beautiful children. I love seeing their
Thank you.
photos that you post. And so definitely, I just appreciate you being, transparent in that way. And so tell me, how did you come to, at what point did your journey meet with Cave Canem? And did you know,
Mhm.
okay, I need this next step for my growth?
Well, it was so Derek Weston Brown. He became a Cave Canem fellow
Uh-huh.
before I did, and so I learned about Cave Canem through him. And it was, like Derek was cool. He would take me to some of the Cave Canem functions, and like because Cave Canem is based in New York, a lot of the activities are based in New York. But at one point, and this is probably why there was such a larger number, why majority of the founding classic Cave Canem came from DC, but Cornelius Eady was teaching at American
Oh,
University.
yes, right. Mm-hmm.
And so there was a Cave Canem community in DC.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I remember uh, he would do like there would be various things like he and his wife Sarah, like the house they had in DC, like they were very open about opening up their home to folks.
Mm-hmm.
And so I remember Derek took me to a gathering at Cornelius and Sarah's home, and I'm walking through, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, like kind of semi, starstruck.
Exactly. Right.
I'm walking through Tayimba Jess is in the kitchen, joking, just chatting up a group of folks. Terry Cross before she was Terry Cross Davis.
Mm-hmm.
I bumped into her, her there. It was really cool. It was cool to be in the midst of like all that black brilliance. And so, but Derek would bring me through. And when I saw that, I think I was like, oh man, I really got to be a part of this. Want to be a part of this. And so, I applied. I think the first time I applied, I didn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of gave myself some time. And then when I reapplied, I got in. So we got in like in 2007.
Okay.
And the funny thing about it though is I had to talk about my mom. So she was like always like one of my cheerleaders. My mom is not a poetry head. My
Mm-hmm.
mom does not know what Cave Canem is beyond what I told her. But when I told her that I got into Cave Canem, she was at the hairdresser. I
Okay.
called her and said, hey mom, I got my acceptance letter from Cave Canem. My mom was screaming like I had the winning lotto ticket. She
Oh.
was screaming and oh my God. Now, if anybody in the salon asked her about Cave Canem, she'd be like, she wouldn't have the words for it, but she was
Yeah.
happy.
But she knows it was valuable for you and for your
Yeah,
writing. Yeah. So
exactly.
that's great.
hmm Yeah, so it was, and then yeah, you know what, got into Cave Canem, met more writers, and I um I learned something about myself too. And one of the things I learned was that I didn't think it was possible to write a poem a day, but
Okay.
I didn't want to be the one who didn't have a poem for the workshop. And so
Wow.
what was really cool was like watching everyone find their process, and everyone's process of accomplishing that looked different. So
Mm-hmm.
like me, I like things would stress me until they're done. So like I'd always do something ahead of time and I'd keep working ahead so that I could relax and at least enjoy it. So I remember writing my first poem in the opening circle. And I'm writing that poem for the next day, and then the next day comes, I'm writing the poem for the next day, and then I started writing poems 2 days in advance.
Wow.
And that was, I mean, it was a way of like kind of easing,
Sure.
kind of it easy because I didn't have to think about it like, oh man, I got to write the poem. So that was my process. But then you have folks that would like drink some really hard liquor
Mm-hmm.
and they like doing the Soul Train line and all kinds of different their poem yet. They're doing all this stuff, right? And you like, oh my gosh. And then when everything quiets down is when they start writing their poem. And like they show up, some of them would show up to workshop with this really long poem. And I'm like, oh
Mm.
my God. And I thought they would burn out, but that was their process. They kept
Sure.
cranking out these pieces, but it was so cool to see that, to see everyone finding their process and
Mm-hmm.
delivering on that. Because again, nobody wanted to be that person that didn't have a poem.
That showed up without a poem, exactly. And so
Yeah,
you do whatever you need to get your muse.
exactly.
Yeah, so I can totally understand that.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah,
and what was your MFA program like? And did you do Stone Coast?
I did. So
Okay.
I so I got into an MFA program well, there were two people that were responsible for me
Let me
going for
guess,
an
Patricia
MFA.
Smith?
Well, so Patricia Smith definitely, Tim Siebels
Okay.
was I mean I came across Tim Siebel's work in 2006. I was reading Patricia Smith's work before
Uh-huh.
that. So Patricia Smith, it was Life According to Motown, Big City, Big Talk, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I was reading those collections like, oh my God, like again, just learning what was possible in poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And I had already had like a bunch of Patricia Smith's books when I came across Tim Siebel's work.
Okay.
And I mean, when I read Tim Siebel's work, I was like, that's when I knew that a poem could have so much swag and so much
Mm-hmm.
cool. And the very first poem I read by him that just made me scream out. I was in a work study program when I was at Howard, and when my supervisors left, that I'd like search for poems and be reading poems online. And so Fred was like, "Yo, check out Tim Stevens." So I Googled Tim, and I
Mm-hmm.
came across Tim's poem for Brothers Everywhere.
Mm.
And I remember just being blown back. Like, he had this line. So it's a poem about basketball, but so many other things about life he touches on in that poem. And the one line that like made me just kind of like made me make the ugly face, and usually the ugly face in hip hop, you make that ugly face when a beat is just right, or the
When
beat.
it's just so hot and it's so crazy. I know what
Yeah,
you mean. I know what you mean. It's like
ugly
it's
face.
that stank face. Yes.
Yeah. So I was reading the poem and the line where he talked about this brother jumping through the air to dunk. And he said, yeah, he compared his body to a muscular saxophone, body
Wow.
popping through the air. And I
Mm.
was like, oh my gosh.
Wow. A muscular saxophone.
Yes.
Whew. That's crazy. Yes.
And so I was like, oh, this guy is awesome. So yeah, it was definitely Patricia Smith and Tim Siebels. And actually, both of them wrote letters of recommendation for me to get into Stonecoast.
Wow. That's
Uh,
great.
One person that was really instrumental in me getting in that program was my wife.
Okay.
And this was like 2011. I'm gonna just be real. I gotten fired from my newspaper job. I
Mm-hmm.
got fired because I stood up for myself. Uh,
Oh, okay.
I got fired from my newspaper job, and my wife, so I was just kind of in a space where I was doing like odd gigs, and then when I
Sure.
worked, I was doing unemployment. So my wife was getting ready to go for her MSW.
Okay.
And so we were in a studio apartment near the college where she was going to get it. So she was like, hey, and every time I talked to her, yeah, I'm going to get my MFA. I'm going to get my MFA.
Right, right.
So she was like, well, hey,
Now's the time. You've just been freed
exactly,
up.
exactly. She was like, it would be awesome if we were both in school at the same
At the
time.
same time. I'm
Exactly.
curious, was this before or after the babies?
Oh, before.
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 Okay. That's great. Yeah.
This was before. So
Yeah.
we got into her program, and I was kind of torn. I was gonna go wherever Tim Siebels was. I,
Wow.
I was torn between Old
Well,
Dominion
he was
University.
at, I don't know if he still is, but I know he was at ODU for quite a while.
Yeah, no, he's retired
He's
now.
retired. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So he was at ODU, and then he was part-time faculty at Stonecoast.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't actually, let me go back. So I found out about Stonecoast when I went to AWP in New York, and I think that was like 2000. I think that was 2007. Yeah. And I went to the Bowery, and Patricia Smith and Tim Siebels was reading there. Annie Finch, who was the director of the Stonecoast program at the time, was there, and they were doing the Stonecoast reading.
Oh, wow.
And so I went there to meet Tim, and Patricia was like teasing me. She's like, "Oh, you here to see Tim?" Just kind of messing with me. And so, I said, "Yeah." I said, "What's going on?" So she said, "Oh, well, this is the Stonecoast MFA reading." And so that was when I found out about it. And that's where I met Tim Siebels in person. Prior to that, he and I had been going back, had been corresponding through email. So met in person there. But anyway, after that moment, I was like, okay, either Old Dominion University or Stonecoast. And Old Dominion University required the GRE.
Oh, okay.
So I was like, I'm good. So I wrote, I just wrote a bunch of essays for Stonecoast and got, some small scholarships to get into the program. And yeah, that's how I got in. So I went initially because of Tim.
Sure.
And was icing on the cake that Patricia was there.
Right.
I got exposed to other staff members other faculty that was like very.
Because I think there are a number of poets that teach. Does Amanda Johnston teach there or?
Yep.
Has taught, right.
Yeah, so she came in after I started the program. So I was like her, not mentor, but kind of like her guide when she came to Stonecoast.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, because I probably did like a semester or two before Amanda got in. But like, I was at Stonecoast. I wanted to study under Scott Woven, so I did a semester of fiction.
Oh, okay.
Right, working on a short story, and then Joy Harjo came to, and Marilyn Nelson. They came to Stonecoast as guest faculty.
Visiting,
Yeah, and then Joy Harjo. I ended up getting Joy Harjo as a mentor, and what it was. I didn't know who I wanted to be my mentor.
Right. And so many great folks to choose from, right?
And then I didn't even think about going for Joy Harjo because I was like, oh man, my work is, she may not be, like my work may not be her flavor.
Sure.
And
right.
And then she had actually requested me to, she had said, hey, she'd be open to having me as a mentee if I was open to having her as a mentor. And I said, sure. Yeah, so it was a great experience. And it was a good time. And I learned a lot and met a lot of great writers who were students at the time. And and I had an excuse to be in Maine.
Oh, okay. Right. Yeah, it sounds like. And so Joy ended up being, I guess, your MFA, like your thesis advisor, or?
Yeah. So I had no. So I had Joy Harjo for my I think I had Joy Harjo for my second semester.
Okay.
And Joy Harjo, I jokingly say that she was like kind of like a fitness instructor for my poems. Like, the metaphors and some of these, I kind of see them as like the muscles of a poem. And so she was like, yeah, you're not working hard enough. She would push me really, to really go there with the work. And so, so that was why when Point Blank came out, that was my thesis manuscript in the program. So when that came out, I was like, well, Tim and Joy Harjo were both so involved in it because they were my mentors and they were really involved in the work. So it made sense to reach out to them for blurbs when that book came out, and they were both very generous and wrote the blurbs for it. To this day, I'm grateful. But the wild thing was when Joy Harjo wrote the blurb, she was not the U.S. Poet Laureate.
Right, exactly. But she became Poet Laureate after. Yeah.
Yeah, when she did that, my publisher hit me up with all kind of smiley face emojis.
Yeah, I bet. That's huge. That's really huge.
Yeah, so I'm grateful to them for the generosity they showed me, and as well as and they showed that generosity to other writers too.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like you've had quite a wonderful journey, Alan, and it sounds like you've really studied and you've been fortunate to study with some prolific and notable poets, and also developing your own reading lists and your own style as a poet, which is wonderful. And so now, just coming back to your latest collection, Crooked Smiling Light, how would you describe some of the themes and topics that are in this current collection? As I heard you read the poem, I want to say Journeys, or The Journey,
Mhm.
on the pandemic, Poets versus Pandemic reading. You also read The Island of Smiles. You have a number of wonderful poems that really speak to not only, things that maybe we may deal with the pandemic, but also some social justice. You
Mhm.
also seem to have some real reflective poems, poems of memory in this collection. And so, can you please talk to me a little bit about those themes and what your focus was?
Sure. So, I mean, the best way for me to do that is just say where the title of the collection came from.
Okay.
And so the title, it comes from like a worldview that I got from my dad. And so I remember my dad would tell me, when things seemed overwhelming and things seemed like the moments seemed like they were getting darker. My dad would always say, no matter how dark a moment is, it will always get better at some point.
Mm,
You won't stay in that challenge or whatever um, the entire time. At some point, you're gonna overcome.
right.
And so that was his way of telling me to hang in there. And so the title also comes. So with my dad saying that, you know, I I started also too kind of seeing life as like the presence of light.
Mm,
And metaphorically, of course, that light is like our joys,
mm-hmm.
you things that make us happy. But that light, because life is the way it is, it's not a straight path,
Right.
a
Exactly.
lot of zigzags. And so for me, my way of interpreting what my dad told me was that when I'm going through, or when my family was going through moments where it seemed dark, the presence of light was still there, but we were just kind of going through the bend of it. And so, and when we stuck through it, we were fortunate enough to come out back into light, and so that's where the title Crooked Smiling Light came from. It's like, our lives consist of joys, but also unfortunate circumstances. And so I wanted, like when I had already written the poems, but I felt like that title kind of encompassed what the mood was in the collection,
Mm,
because I got poems in here where there's like a lot of light, so like poems celebrating birth and celebrating other happy moments, but then there were poems in it where we were kind of in that bend, like when my wife needed kidney transplant.
mm-hmm.
We're just trying to figure out the quickest way to get her on the list. And,
Right.
and eventually coming out into light, like when we had our surgery, and, um, and her numbers, her, started improving and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to, and then, I wanted to kind of, so I feel like the collection kind of deals with that. It deals with, just all that life throws at us, like the dark moments as well as the bright ones. So like
Mm-hmm.
those moments take place within families, within households, where there's misunderstanding. And it also, just as I explained before, it also takes place in our health. So I wanted this collection to be hopeful, but not be but not like with a naive type of hope.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I do see a range of that, because you do mention family in the poems. You also mentioned you've got a poem here for George Floyd, Jade Rose and George Floyd, The Land of
Mm-hmm.
Innocence. I really enjoyed the poem What's Unsaid. It has
Thank
a
you.
very nice rhythm and kind of bringing your family or family into the poem. A lot of really nice structure for your poem, just the rhythm of it, and how you have the different subject matter in it. I really think it gives a lot for the reader to digest for sure.
Thank you. Thank
And
you.
the light inside, I'm assuming this would be for your wife. Um,
Yeah, so the
yeah,
inside, yeah, it was for my wife
yeah.
um and my daughter Jasmine.
And your daughter is beautiful. Yeah, very
Thank you.
nice. Um, and so, Alan, do you have a selection of, a few poems that you'd be so gracious to read from your collection?
Sure, sure. So I will, yeah, I'll read Gluttony.
And I'm
Okay.
gonna I'm gonna follow along with you from my book also.
Okay. Gluttony. Combing the bargain bin. A woman who's not your wife brushes beside you asking if the Roy Hargrove CD you're holding is any good. She's close enough for you to smell her ginger patchouli body wash. The angle she gives you in her leather bomber jacket, the one unzipped showing a white tee retracing her athletic stomach and arms, the jacket with its collar flared, makes her a bright blossom booming its honeydew scented tune along her neckline. And your father's voice from 2 decades before warns you about gorging on everything you see. You were 16 the first time he told you, when your hunger hovered like that summer at Myrtle Beach, sister strutting the boardwalk beneath a honey barbecue sun whose sweet light made each of them a long stretch of marinade, a chromatic scale of flavors along which your tongue was burning to play. And isn't temptation always lurking, eager to hold our common sense hostage? You tell the flower woman you're married after she points to a flyer for a roots show and says y'all should go. When she asks, are you happy? You remember a brother once asking how you could love one woman when the world's a buffet, the possibilities of pleasure laid out like jumbo crab cakes, lasagna rolls, and buffalo wings. What's gluttony if not a symptom of our own hunger consuming us? Wasn't Jack as careless selling his sustenance for a handful of beans? You remember the story of the stalk that almost made him a hungry giant's grub. You still hear the pastor preaching about gluttons wearing the rags of drowsiness, which is how your wife found you, stumbling through the days. Your life before her was a stringless violin, a dark garden of wilted sunflowers, a camper trailer rusting against a moldy brick wall. You were once a city of power lines, boarded up clock towers, junked cars, and blazing drum barrel fires. What she saw in you, only her heart knows. Just like it knew you'd leave the temptress back at the listening booth, watching the automatic doors close behind you. At 16, you thought all there was to living was filling your appetite. Too young to know love is the everyday meal, that the lack of it kills quicker than the absence of food.
Wow, it's beautiful. And
Thank you.
so much imagery in this poem, and just a lot of feels. You know what I mean? A lot of
Uh-huh.
sensory detail, which you can see and feel, taste and touch in that poem.
Yeah,
Very
thank you.
nice. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Let's see. Well, since you mentioned the land of innocence, I will read that.
Okay.
Yeah, so the land of innocence for Jade Rose and George Floyd. A YouTube clip shows a protest ignited after police killed George Floyd, torched SUVs, overturned cop cars, armored officers retreating. All of that sinks my wife into a deeper postpartum, having made it through our personal crisis. We watched the python of despair coil itself around America, blowing out glass storefronts and colliding angry bodies as the tension constricts and crushes. We're miles from the mayhem, but a different kind of danger finds us in the maternity ward. A decreasing heartbeat, frenzied nurses rushing my wife to the OR, surgeons scrambling to save our daughter. Watching the news, I'm reminded of slogans on chaos as necessity. Real discoveries come from chaos. Chaos is beautiful and full of fertility. But when it's a violent pattern of reactions, what's the real discovery? Where's the beauty in things shattered and tagged if the same pattern of injustice ripples our lives? So maybe chaos isn't the right word. Let's try instead challenge. And since it means refuting the truth or its validity, isn't a protest a public dispute of someone else's truth? Like the one about the fear of dark bodies, how it justifies us being mangled or discredited in news cycles. Wouldn't the beauty then be new laws that get us closer to becoming the people the Constitution claims it protects? Let me begin again. When my wife told me several months ago she was pregnant, we knew the challenge of this birth could take her life, just as the challenge in a hospital threatened our daughters. And isn't it an act of faith to go blindfolded into the future and be delighted by the light there? Now we're lit by a dancing star named Jade, short for Jarisola, which in Yoruba means come into wealth. She's jade like the green stone, said to emit wisdom and clarity. I'm feeding her while watching the YouTube video. Someone on screen yells, "We're better than this!" And she squeals, mouth dripping with her mother's milk, smiling while dreaming her baby dreams. That land of innocence, where it all starts before we lose our way back, rationalizing our destruction.
Mm, wow, that's really powerful.
Thank you.
And, you know, the bravery of you and your wife really conveyed through this poem in the backdrop of everything going on in society as well. Um,
Thank you.
you know, is just really, really for sharing that.
Oh,
And do
sure,
you have
sure.
perhaps one more, Alan?
Yeah, so I'm gonna end on a this is another poem for Jade Rose. It's called A Prayer for the Bees.
And what page is that on?
That
Let's
is
see.
page 38.
38. Okay.
Hmm.
I was going a little further.
Hmm.
Oh, wow. This is the last poem.
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful. Okay.
Nice. A prayer for the bees. Bless them all, nature's letter carriers and freighters, their determination, like the busy engines of commerce, picking up and dropping off their haul. Bless this life of droning for the colony, working their sweet economy that sprouts the apples and pears cooling in your crisper drawer, the coffee grounded and brewed that kicks your senses awake. Let's not forget the butternut squash, the one your wife roasted into a savory soup. That's them too. You can still feel the gentle bite of ginger. Bless those that build the hive. Bless the ones that clean it. Bless the defenders. Bless the undertakers ushering away the dead and diseased to keep the colony healthy. Bless the nurses incubating the babies. And bless the bastards dropping to their death after a tryst with the queen. Could you do it, you wonder? Die for sex? Even if your life came down to that final task, even for the good of the colony, bless their bravery, bless their music streaming on your phone, their buzz, buzz, buzzing your fussy infant hears as a lullaby before letting it lull her back to sleep, before the whole house rests, grateful for their humble roles, their thankless sacrifices.
Hmm. Wow, that's really, really nice. Very rich. And so,
Thank you.
are you a beekeeper?
No, no, no. So the wild thing was that poem came to me because my wife and I, like, we needed some sounds to help Jade Rose go to sleep.
Uh-huh.
And so we would go on YouTube and just look up bee sounds. And
Really?
yeah, and we played it and she would calm down. So she was like real fussy. And
Uh-huh.
we knew to do that because we would do that with our older daughter, Jasmine, when Jasmine
Okay.
infant, like, I think we were out someplace and Jasmine was, she was just not happy. So I remember putting my mouth to her ear and just kind of buzzing, and she stopped.
Whoa.
Oh wow! And she started leaning. Jazz would like lean into me when I would make the buzzing sound.
That's
So I was
deep.
like, well, obviously I can't keep doing this. So we went on
Exactly.
and we found the B sounds. And so I put, like, when Jazz used to get fussy, I put it on and she calmed down. So when Jade Rose would get fussy, we put it on and she calmed down. And so uh,
Mm.
that became our thing. And so the funny thing is, to this day, Jade Rose is like 18 months.
Uh-huh.
And when we put it down for her naps, and even when we put it down for bedtime, we put the B sounds on.
Really? And
She
she goes right to sleep.
Well, she knows. Well, now she's because it's part of the bedtime ritual.
Uh-huh.
She knows when we put those B sounds on that it's time to get ready
She
for
knows what's
bed.
coming. Okay.
Exactly,
That's
exactly.
amazing.
And so that's where the poem came from.
Who would have, this is beautiful. Who would have ever thought bee sounds as a lullaby? Is that common for babies?
Oh well, I don't know if I think so because there's a those sounds have gotten like millions of there's millions of plays
Uh-huh.
of those sounds, but then also too, like, I think it comes up when you're looking for white noise
Oh,
for
okay.
babies. So like you'll
Mm-hmm.
get kind of things, and one of them is the sound of bees because they're soothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's where that came from, and I actually started writing that poem when I was bathing Jade Rose. Another part of my process is like I'll write in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And when I get to a point where I feel like I have enough of the poem, then I'll start typing it out on my phone. Yeah, because it's I use an app that I can then go to the desktop and kind of flesh out whatever I typed out on the phone. But yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
started working on it while I was bathing her. It was coming to me, and so yeah, that's the story behind that piece.
I love it. That's really putting your poetic mind to work. I mean, looking at, what you're using your children and how it lends itself to, being creative and crafting a new poem.
Oh yeah, I mean the process. It's always evolving because I think a while back, I was on a panel with some other writers, and somebody had asked about, how different life changes affect
Mm-hmm.
your process. And I was
Mm.
saying that for me, because I have to do it, like the different life, I won't call them interruptions, but like different things going on in my life, the process will evolve to involve like the new change in my life. So like my process was one way when I was single, but then when my wife and I started dating and we're spending all this time around each other, my process shifted to include her. You know,
Wow.
figured
Mm-hmm.
another way of like, oh, another time to write. Which was often when she was asleep, when my wife was asleep.
Sure.
And when we had kids, the process shifted for them. So like now it's whenever I can get some time to work on something. But yeah, it's always for me. I'm speaking for myself. The process is always shifting for every new addition. Every new thing coming into my life. So
Sure. That makes total sense. It's your poetry is a part of the family now. So
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
member of the family and you have to make time for it. So
yeah.
and so tell us, Alan, with your new collection, and I know you're making your rounds and doing different events, as I've seen your posts on Instagram. What are you looking forward to, and what's in the works for you coming in the coming months?
So I would like to do more video trailers for poems. My wife jokingly said that I should do like what Beyonce did with Lemonade.
Right? Do a little mini movie and all that.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I have one for every poem, but I want to create more of those, and I'm actually looking forward to writing new work.
And call yours Poet Aid. But
Uh,
I know that was kind of corny, but okay.
no, hey, but no, it's I'm looking forward to writing new poems, and then I'm just I get excited when I look at where I am in my life and how the new work is going to be different because of that. Like the new
Sure.
work, I'll be whatever that is, and whenever I start writing it, it's going to focus more on this point in my life, where I am, as a parent, as a husband, as a, just a person, where I currently am is going to find its way into some new work. So I'm excited to do that. And yeah, and then I'm also too, more than anything, I've been watching Jasmine, and when Jade Rose gets older, I'll be watching her too to see where, but I want to see where their artistic
What their
interest.
interests are. Sure.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to, I don't want to influence it in any way. I just want to kind of watch, and wherever it lands, I just want to be able to, my wife and I, we just want to be able to try to support their interests and help them grow in whatever discipline they choose for themselves or they feel called to.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
it's so wonderful having an artistic household and with supportive parents. It just really means that they will have the confidence to pursue whatever it is that they have, an interest in.
hmm Yeah, and yeah, we just want to allow them to find themselves and to explore that. So
That's
yeah, so I'm
wonderful.
looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing them discover that.
For sure. And so, Alan, just as we're about to close out, can you please tell me where we can purchase and support your book, Crooked Smiling Light, and also how we can continue to follow you and support you in general as an.
Oh, sure. So Crooked Smiling Light is available at planbpress.com. And I think Stephen Allen May and his wife, over at Plan B Press, they did a great job with the chapbook. So, but yeah, I always want to shout them up, but definitely planbpress.com. And then I am on Facebook at oh gosh, I think it's AW King. So it's facebook.com
Mm-hmm.
slash, let me
A.W.
make
King.
AW King. Yeah, AW King 020881.
Okay.
And then it's on Instagram. I think it's the same thing, AW King 020881. But I'm on Twitter as A King 020881. And those numbers are my birth date.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, and also, Alan, your website. Come on and mention that too.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Can't forget that.
Oh gosh, yeah. So AlanWking.com. And so for those who don't know how to spell, my name is AlanW King, KING.com.
Well, thank you so much, Alan. It's been a pleasure to talk with you today on the podcast and hear your writing journey, as well as hearing you read from your wonderful new collection, Crooked Smiling Light. Of course, I will continue to follow you and support what you're doing, and I hope that you will keep in touch with Nerdacity Podcast as well.
Definitely. And thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Alan, and best wishes for you.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you. You too.
And you were just listening to episode 37 of Nerdacity Podcast featuring my guest, poet Alan King. Check out Alan's latest chapbook titled Crooked Smiling Light from Plan B Press. Be sure to visit his website at alanwking.com. You can also follow him on all social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and certainly check out his blog. I hope you'll continue to support Nerdacity Podcast, and if you've been enjoying these episodes, where I promote authors, books, poetry, film, culture commentary, and more, please consider giving a small donation this season at paypal.me/DuEwa World or by visiting anchor.fm/DuEwa Frazier. Also, follow Nerdacity on Instagram at Nerdacity Podcast and on Twitter at NerdacityPod1. Thanks again for listening. Take care.